Alright, hello everybody. So this video is going to be about how to get a good jazz sound on the saxophone. There's two things that I want to go over today, one of them being embouchure and the other one being airspeed. So I'm going to go over embouchure first because that's a simpler one. So when we were first learning how to play saxophone, we were taught that you had to curl your bottom lip over, like pretend this is the teeth, your bottom lip is over the teeth like this, protecting it, right? This kind of thing, which in classical playing is totally the norm and what you should do. For jazz playing, however, you kind of want to modify that a little bit. So you want to have, for jazz embouchure, you want to have your lip out more instead of lip in covering the teeth. You kind of want to have your lip more out like this, kind of like you're pouting, sort of, if that helps. Or the way I kind of like to do it, tell people, is just put your top teeth on the top of the mouthpiece and just close your mouth like that. And that will basically be your jazz embouchure. And it's not as tight, you're not constricting the reed as much, and that's going to allow it to vibrate more and produce that more rich, open jazz sound that you hear, all the greats play. So let me demonstrate that for you. First one is going to be the lip-in classical embouchure. I am still using a jazz mouthpiece, but it's going to sound more classical because I'm playing with more of a lip-in, closed-off classical embouchure. So that's how most people sound when they're playing jazz, even with a jazz mouthpiece. It still doesn't, it sounds okay, but it doesn't sound interesting. It doesn't sound jazzy. It doesn't sound cool. It kind of sounds meh. Like, it doesn't sound that good for jazz. Like, if you hear somebody like Kenny Garrett play, you hear Charlie Parker play, or you hear Paul Desmond play, and they don't have that. They have that nice, open, round, big sound. They don't have this small, kind of classical, pea shooter sound. So this is going to be the embouchure that is more jazz with the lip out. It sounds much more open. It sounds much more expressive. It sounds way more flexible. And I think, to me, sounds cooler. So that's the first step in getting that nice jazz sound. The second step, to me, is the way your air is directed through the instrument. With classical playing, we want to have a very tight airstream. A very small, fast airstream to get the air through the horn as fast as possible to get that clear tone. And for classical saxophone, that's great. Marcel Mule and Claude Delongla and all these people who have this really clear classical tone, that's what they do. Of course, they're also playing on classical equipment and stuff, but that's another issue. But with jazz, you don't really want that. And there's varying degrees of this, but generally speaking, you want to have a wider air column, a wider, fatter air column. Because that's going to be more flexible. It's going to sound, again, more expressive and more open. You want to have that nice open sound when you play jazz, not a closed off, pinched, fast sound. You want a manipulative sound, one that you can manipulate, and you want something that is nice and big and open. So those two things kind of sound like this. And I'm going to play with the jazz lip out embouchure also. This first one is going to be the classical airstream. Right? The sound is a little bit narrow. It's still better, but it still sounds kind of narrow to me. And what you really want to do is kind of fatten it up, beef it up a little bit. And this is with the more fatter jazz airstream. again, more open, bigger, more expressive. There's multiple ways to do that. It's all about voicing. And for me, when I play, I'm always thinking of, with classical, you always want to keep the sound in the front of your mouth more. And in jazz, you kind of want to keep it in the middle or the back. It's kind of the difference between, like, if you hear the French language versus German language or the English language or something, where German and English are more formed in the back of your throat or the middle, rather than, French, it's that's how they talk, because it's all up here in the front. And that's one way you can think about it. Another way that guys tend to do this is they puff their cheeks a little bit, kind of like that. I mean, most teachers say don't do that, but I've seen people do it and it works for them. So if that works for you, go ahead and do it. It doesn't really work that well for me, but if it works for you, go ahead and do it. Kirk Whalum is an example of a guy, tenor player, who, if you look up Kirk Whalum on YouTube, he has these big puffy cheeks, and I think that's how he gets that sound that he gets, which is really, I think, pretty cool. But if it works for you, go ahead and do it. But just think about, widening your airstream, your air column a little bit. So let me play a little bit. So that would be an example of playing a tune with, an open embouchure, an open, large airstream, and getting that jazz sound. And I know a lot of it is completely backwards from what any of you have heard, and definitely a concert band or solo ensemble, don't do this. But if you're playing jazz band, go ahead and experiment with it and see what happens. And your equipment, your mouthpiece also has a lot to do with it. Maybe I'll make a video explaining, like, how to pick a jazz mouthpiece, because that's important, and I know way too much about that. So look out for that in the future. So see you next time.